at that expanse. Most people would look at that expanse of lawn and think, bye-bye Saturday afternoon. I look at it and think, well, ingredients for my compost. But more on that later. Let's have a look at what's on this week's show.
There's an old saying that agriculture makes life possible, but it's horticulture that makes it worthwhile. Well, I'll be at a garden that is one of the Australian birthplaces of both of these noble arts.
I'll show you an innovative public space project that's delivering benefits for the whole community.
And I'm going to plant some Asian greens and spring onions. They're quick growing and they'll be ready to harvest soon.
I'm about an hour's drive northwest of Cairns, heading to a garden that I haven't seen for 10 years. Back then, I was blown away by what I saw. Weird, wonderful, beautiful, rare and edible plants. If you can't tell, I'm pretty excited about going back. I just want to see what's happened in the 10 years since I've been here to both the garden and its extraordinary gardener. Peter Sargent is a gardener who's in love with his garden. He may spend his working day growing and selling heliconias and gingers, and while they're beautiful, it's the more unusual plants that float his boat.
Ta-da! The largest leaf in the world!
What does this place mean to you?
Jerry, this is my whole life. It's like putting the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together and collecting the most amazing things that God has given us on this earth. So it's not my garden, I just play here.
Now, Peter, with this plant here, I can see a little bit of Strelitzia and a little bit of heliconia, but it's neither. What is it?
This is a very unusual specimen. It's called Phenacus spermoguinensis, and it's from Guyana in South America, and it's a cousin of the heliconias and the bananas. The whole idea is to obtain and grow these plants so that people can see all these amazing structures in one single area.
While this is a collector's garden, Peter appreciates his plants with an artist's eye.
I realised that the art that exists already in nature was the type of art that everybody could appreciate, that anybody looking at it could easily fall in love with it, just like you do with a painting or with a sculpture. So through this little bit of jungle that we've got here, Jerry, we've got some very unusual heliconia species. We can see above our heads here.
That's a beauty.
This is called Heliconia mariae, or the American call it Heliconia beefsteak.
So can you propagate those from seed?
Yeah, most certainly, Jerry, and this is one of the ways which we introduced a lot of these particular plants is actually growing the heliconia from seed.
So what have we got here?
Jerry, this is a calathea. It's one of the more obscure flowers that we grow. It commonly gets called calathea rattlesnake. It comes from Central and South America. And with the calathea family, there's many, many unusual structures. So you can see the florets emerge in a straight line from the edge so that the hummingbird can sit there flying like this and actually pollinate many flowers at once while it hovers right there where its food source is. So yeah,
they've
very
evolved
clever.
Together.
Very amazing. What comes first? The chicken or the egg? We don't know. So this is the incredible loop that's in nature. Here we have quite an endangered palm. This is Metroxylon amicarium, which comes from the Caroline Islands, which is the most extreme group of islands in the North Pacific. And these islands are actually going underwater. So the area which they're endemic to will soon become flooded.
So this really encapsulates your work in one plant. It's important as a species. It's a representative of its genus, which is totally different. Its habitat is disappearing, so this is genetically important as well as being an important specimen in Australia.
That's right, Jerry. And on top of that, just to bring the art back into it, it has the most beautiful seed. This is the largest metroxylon seed. As you can see, it's a full handful, and the texture on the outside is very beautiful. A common name for it, often in a lot of places, is the fake ivory palm, because the kernel of the seed is actually used to carve little ornaments and decorations or jewellery. So yeah, in your hands right there, you've got the beginning of another whole generation that mightn't go underwater.
There's great beauty in the fruits of the tropics, and Peter grows many that would be unfamiliar to most gardeners.
We've got an abu, which is from South America, Akari nuts from New Guinea, Chempedak from Malaysia and Asia, soursop from Asia as well, another interesting member of the Artocarpus family called the kucha, the cousin of the breadfruit and the jackfruit. This is the smallest pineapple in the world, a Nanus nanus, and sometimes we call it cocktail pineapple because it actually grows on a long stick and used as a swizzle stick in cocktails. The Buddha's hand, it's actually a citrus fruit, and originally the monks in Thailand have cultivated this in the monasteries to put with their robery so that the robes have a very beautiful smell to them. So a very interesting fruit.
And this one over here is Bixa.
So this is the seed, Jerry, that they originally used as lipstick.
Gorgeous.
And our original rouge, and also the colouring in Edam cheese.
Peter's collection is not just curious, it's also important, with many of the species in this garden now rare or endangered in the wild.
To me, the most important thing in my life is to be able to show and present incredible art that exists on our earth, as flowers, as plants, as trees, as fruit, as food.
Well, this place is packed with plants, and I've soaked up as much as I can. Let's hope it's not another 10 years before my next visit.
It's no secret that I love compost, and what I get most excited about is the ingredients are all around us, everywhere we look, every single day, and they're free. We can get out there and collect some leaves and twigs, and they're the brown material or carbon. Alternatively, mowing the lawn yields us all of this green material. The lawn clippings are nitrogen. Now, for a good compost, we need a nice balance between the two. And as a top tip, I'm going to show you today how you can mix this with this using this. Spread the dried leaves you've collected evenly over the lawn. Start your engine and give them a good mowing over. They'll get mixed perfectly with the lawn clippings. Look how evenly it's been mixed together. Absolutely perfect. You had to mow the lawn, that's done. You need some ingredients mixed for your compost, that's done too. Simple tip, why not try it?
Now, you're probably wondering What on earth does skateboarding have to do with gardening? Well, I'm going to tell you. But first, you need to know where I am. This is Fremantle's Esplanade Youth Plaza, an innovative and award-winning public space designed by youth, for youth. And there's clearly a need for this sort of innovation, because as our cities grow, public space is becoming more precious, and it's important to ensure that a range of ages and interest groups are catered for. And that's the view shared by the Mayor of Fremantle, Dr. Brad Pettit. So what was the thinking behind the space?
It was around providing facilities for youth. We hadn't provided anything new for youth for more than 20 years in Fremantle, and we thought it's really about time to give them something great right in the heart of Freo. And we totally flipped the idea of what you normally do at a skate park, which is, put it in a bit of town that nobody goes to and, down the back of a car park or next to a railway line. And so we want to be right at the very centre of our best park, in the Esplanade Park here in Freo.
So tell us about the history of the project, how it sort of started.
It started actually, in many ways, driven by youth. They came along to our community consultations, got their pencils out and said, this is what we want to see, and it was fantastic.
I think with the meetings that we first had in the beginning, there was a lot of controversy around, was this going to be something that was beneficial to Fremantle, or was it going to just bring antisocial behaviour? But I think evidently you can see that it's actually just brought the community together, and, families come down here, and it just shows that, skaters are not to be ostracised or pushed to the side, that we're all a part of just, making Fremantle what it is and bringing, the culture to life. So, it's been an amazing thing, and I'm so glad that it went ahead, because if it didn't, none of this would have ever happened. So, yeah.
Ben Bowring is from Skateboarding WA and has nothing but praise for the place.
Oh, it's one of the best as far as the way it looks. It's very integrated into the middle of a community.
And is it used a lot?
Oh, it's packed every day. Even today, on a rainy morning, it's been packed, which is great. Skateboarders non-stop.
And how about the nighttime use under lights? Is it used a lot?
Oh, it's packed. Gets people active, gets them off the couch, off the Facebook, off all the social media stuff. So it's a creative place for sure.
The proof of any pudding is in the eating. So what do the skateboarders think of the park?
Well, I think it's pretty amazing because we haven't had something like this before.
Yeah, and it's also brilliant because the actual community involvement in the creation of the skate park and the planning and the ideas and everything came together so beautifully. It's a brilliant training facility for people of all ages.
Yeah, it's very scenic. So I feel like, even when tourists come here, they look at it and they're like, whoa, this is awesome. And I feel so proud to be like, oh yeah, this is the Fremantle skate park, because it's not just about skate park in itself, it is its location, because it's in such a prime place where, people want to come here and they want to see skaters actually doing what they do.
Okay, so as a skate facility, this place has been given a thumbs up by the experts. But from an urban design perspective, I reckon it also really hits the mark. It's inclusive and it's activated the space, which is bringing people in and doing good things. But there's also some clever design elements. It's things like the buoy and also the sea containers, which kind of nod their head to Fremantle's working port status. And the incorporation of materials like heritage red brick and steel and old timber railway sleepers, again, all very Fremantle. And then there's the plantings. There's a big avenue of these tuckaroo trees, which in due course will provide plenty of shade to sit under. And then the mass plantings of hardy grasses, which are as tough as nails, and they can cop a hammering from kids or skateboards or whatever.
Is your helmet?
Good, will it fit? That's the question.
It should do. It's a double XL, like my T-shirts.
Good, eh? It fits like a glove.
Wrap this around.
These are very precious gardening hands, you do realise that.
They are. We're going to keep those gardening hands in good condition. Here's your skateboard.
Okay, now, which side goes forward?
Okay.
I'm joking. All right, I'm ready to go.
Back and lift it on.
Now, as a Freo lad, this is my local skate park. And although it's been around 25 years since I've been on a board, I'm keen to give it another go. This space shows that we need to be constantly rethinking and planning for our parks and green spaces. You can see this space brings in energy, ideas, creativity, and perhaps most importantly, youth. Now, if you don't mind, I'm off to master the rail.
to always be planting veggies, so there's something for my family to eat. When one crop is finishing, there's another crop ready to harvest. Currently, I'm harvesting broccoli, kale and cabbage, and I'm about to plant some quick-growing veggies that grow well at any time of year. I've got some Asian greens and some spring onions. Now, I give my beds a good improvement once a year, so the soil here is pretty good already. However, I'm going to add some more compost. For fast-growing veggies like these, they need really good rich soils, so make sure that you improve your soil at home with compost and organic fertiliser. Now here I've got some of my favourite Asian greens, which I love to use in stir-fries and luxes. This one is actually Joy Choy, which is a tall-growing version of Pak Choy. It gets to about 30 centimetres high, wonderful big heads, great for a large family. Now I also like to try and have some coloured veggies, and this is one of the red bok choys. It's called Red Choy and it only gets to about 20 centimetres high. These guys are very tasty for us, but also for lots of the critters in the garden. Now, at this time of year, the cabbage white butterfly will be everywhere. So I use these little guys as deterrents. Apparently, the cabbage white butterflies are territorial. So when they see something that looks like a butterfly, they won't come near. Now, snails also like these guys, so I'm going to have to keep an eye on them and make sure they don't cause any damage. I'm planting the Joy Choys about 25 centimetres apart because they form larger rosettes. And I'm planting these red bok choys about 20 centimetres apart. Spring onions are a great value plant because in the kitchen they can be used for such a wide variety of dishes. They're so versatile, whether it's soups, curries, stir-fries, but also in the garden. You can grow them in any space you've got. You could grow them in a pot, in a window box, on a balcony, or in the soil. And I tend to use them as fillers whenever I've got a bit of space free on the end of a bed. Now, you could actually plant them in that cell like that, and then as they grow, you would simply pull out the biggest ones first. But I'm going to split them and plant them individually in a trench. I'm laying these seedlings on one side of the shallow trench, about 5 centimetres apart. Then I'm backfilling over their roots, and I'm spacing another row about 10 to 15 centimetres away. Now I'm watering them all in with a liquid seaweed and organic fertiliser, and this will give them a great start, and I'll aim to do it every few weeks as they grow. These veggies will be ready to harvest in a couple of months, but in my garden I try and plant some more every month to keep up the continuity of supply. It's a great time to get these into your garden this weekend and you'll be on your way.
So Angus, this is Australia's oldest house. This middle section that we're walking past here was built in 1793. And this could be Australia's oldest olive tree, even as old as 1805.
It's a beauty.
And here we have the first camellia cultivar actually produced in Australia.
There are many firsts here at Elizabeth Farm at Parramatta, west of Sydney. For starters, it's the first permanent home of Australia's first family of agriculture, the MacArthurs. It was first set up to solve the food crisis of the fledgling colony, many of whom had arrived on the first fleet. But first things first, it's best you meet my guide, Scott Hill, curator at Sydney Living Museums, a man who knows all about the farm and the family of John MacArthur. So when was the house built?
In late 1793, and by December of that year, the family moved here from Sydney. It's only a small family at that stage. You've got John and his wife Elizabeth and their 2 eldest children.
Why did they choose Parramatta?
Parramatta's a very interesting area at this point. It's the area where agriculture is really first starting in the colony. It's an area of richer alluvial soil, very, very different to the sandy soil that you find down around Sydney Cove.
Is it fair to say there was an interest in garden design?
Yes, every member of the family had this sort of deep interest in plants, both on an economic layer, on a decorative layer, and also on a scientific layer. So you see John, for instance, very interested in developing an olive oil industry. through to Elizabeth and her daughters having a great interest in the decorative aspects of the garden. And then you get William, their youngest son, who has this great scientific interest and builds up a great scientific collection.
How do you go about replicating what the MacArthurs were doing in their garden?
A great source of information is the letters in the archive.
Your sisters have come back from the garden with the heliotropes and garden flowers. The once rare China rose is now scrambling over every fence in every cottage in the district. Your cypresses are doing well. There's an abundance of fruit, including oranges, lemons, olives, almonds, grapes, peaches, apricots and nectarines.
So would I be right in assuming this is one of the heliotropes that Elizabeth wrote about?
Well, that can be the real challenge when you're setting out to recreate a historic garden, is finding the exact historically accurate plant. And with the sheer number of cultivars that we have available today, finding one that hasn't been improved for 150 years can be nigh on impossible. So this is a heliotrope that's historically accurate for the period, and it could be, very well be the one that she's talking about in that letter.
And I guess that's because the flowers are much smaller than the modern cultivars.
Well, certainly when you go and buy a heliotrope today, the flowers have had a lot of breeding to make them much, much larger, and you get a broader range of colours as well. So going back to find these original cultivars, quite often it's very specialist companies or collectors or very old gardens. Even cemeteries can be a great source when you're looking to find these very old plants.
A lot of detective work there.
There's a lot of it, yes. So here we've got a whole stand of Cavendish bananas. That's another one of those plants that in England you're thinking of being in very prized plants in a hothouse. Here they grow in the open. We've replanted them because we can see them really clearly in a sketch from the early 1850s by a MacArthur granddaughter that shows a stand of these bananas growing right here. This, quite likely, is one of the olives brought out by MacArthur in 1805. He's returning from England on board a ship when he actually builds glass houses across the back of the deck to protect the plants.
So this olive tree really demonstrates the dual-purpose nature of a garden, I guess.
Exactly. It's this idea of plants being brought in and being tested, but also plants that are then being grown really for their just general significance and importance.
This beautiful camellia was a really significant plant, not only in the MacArthur history, but also Australian horticultural history.
Aspasia is our first Australian cultivar, and William grew that out at Camden Park. And doesn't it have the most interesting flower?
It does. It's got that beautifully double shape to it, but little flecks of pink through it.
It's almost like someone's got little paintbrushes, giving it little flecks of colour through it.
Yes, and this variety, or cultivar, has stood the test of time. So really, almost 200 years later, it's still being sold in the trade. It's a great example of how William MacArthur really was one of the pioneers of Australian horticulture.
Yeah, because he's not just interested in collecting plants, but also then developing them and producing new cultivars of his own. Every plant that we find here really tells us a story about the family and their interest in plants. Gardens are very fragile things, and they're so easily lost. Not just their plants, but their content and what they represent to people. It's that gardens are amalgams of people's past experiences. It's that cutting you got from your great-grandmother. It's the seeds you got while on that holiday. I think gardens are memory.
September in the subtropics really means we're in our second month of spring. Things are really warming up, so it's the ideal time to pot up young plants. These dracaenas need a bigger home. And begonias like this is a fabulous plant, Begonia cubensis. Cuttings will stripe really quickly now as well. And because the soil is warm, it's a great time for sowing tomatoes, eggplants and basil. I wonder what's going on in Western Australia. What are you up to, Josh?
Well, it's tomato time here too, Jerry, and that means I'll put in a couple of my all-time favourites, Groslis and Sweetbite, which the kids adore. I'll also plant those other summer favourites, including zucchinis and cucumbers. And for that, I'll prepare the soil with some aged manure and homemade compost before sowing the seeds in about 2 weeks' time when the soil settles down. And as the temperature warms up, so does the need to water. So check your irrigation systems, adjust your nozzles, flush your drip lines, and set your controller. And of course, don't forget to mulch. Is it warming up down your way too, Tino?
Hot down here, Josh. Not yet, I'm afraid. Early spring is still quite cold and very windy. So it's a good idea to protect those taller crops, things like your broad beans, using stakes, string and straw bales. Also, we've had a lot of rain over the winter period. And remember, never dig wet ground. It just destroys its structure. So instead, use a fork and aerate the ground to avoid compaction. And it's still cold to get those summer crops in, but it's a good time to lay down roots. So start by sowing seeds of carrots, parsnips and beetroot. So what are you waiting for? Get out there.
Well, that's it for this week. Fields of compost ingredients await me. Time to go. Here's what's coming up on next week's show.
It's early spring, a glorious time of year when a young man's thoughts turn to planting. So I'm going to show you how to establish happy and healthy plants in your garden.
It's like a butterfly wonderland here at the Melbourne Zoo. And I'll show you the important part that plants play in the lives of these beautiful creatures.
You know, I've long had a dream of one day making a go of having my own little farm and garden. So I'm visiting a guy that's made that dream into a reality. And he's done this by diversifying.